بسم الله والحمد لله والصلاة والسلام على سيدنا رسول الله وعلى آله وصحبه ومن والاه واتبع هداه وبعد. For the last couple of classes we have been talking about tadabbur, the meditative reading of the Quran, and we're trying to find practical means to let the Quran transform our life. And we talked about, I think, we had an introduction, and then we talked about capturing the awe of Allah. And then we talked about responding, and we learned how to respond to the ayat so that it can change the heart. And then we talked about reflecting. And then we talked about healing. And we have two more. Tonight we'll be talking about this idea of memorizing. Can memorizing the Quran or some ayat or some passages be useful when it comes to meditation, that it changes the heart? This is what we'll be discussing today. And next week, which will be our last week in this series, will be about practicing. We were supposed to have one more class, but because of some travel plans, we'll do next week, inshallah, and it will be about practicing. So before we talk about memorizing, we also have 3 steps in memorizing. But before we talk about memorizing, I want to ask you guys a question. If you want to find an ayah from the Quran, where do you usually find it? So it's very simple, right? Where do you find the ayat of the Quran? In the Mus'haf, in the shelves. But this is not how the Quran answers this question. The Quran, yes, it is copied in books, but it's more importantly inscribed in hearts. Where are you supposed to find the Quran? In the hearts of people. These are the exact words of the Quran. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, بَلْ هُوَ آيَاتٌ بَيِّنَاتٌ فِي صُدُورِ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمِ. Referring to the Quran. The Quran is a set of clear revelations where in the bookshelves, now فِي صُدُورِ الَّذِينَ أُوتُوا الْعِلْمِ, which is like preserved in the hearts of those who are given knowledge. So where I am supposed to find the Quran, you should find the Quran in your heart. The Prophet ﷺ said in a hadith that means the heart that does not have Quran in it, it's like an abandoned house, an abandoned city. So if you want your heart to be alive, it must have Quran in it. I am not here talking about memorizing all of the Quran, even though we know that the Quran is a memorizable text, even though it reached the peak of Arabic eloquence, but it was made easy for memorization. And this is part of the divine plan. Part of the divine plan for the preservation of the Quran is the ability for this book to be memorized. So it's the only book that countless people throughout the ages and throughout the globe memorize this text, even if they do not speak Arabic. But I'm not talking here about memorizing the whole Quran so that we can meditate on it. But I will present a different idea today. I want to make sure that in this journey with meditating on the Quran and the spiritual reading of the Quran, we need to store away some ayat in our hearts so that we can recall them whenever needed. And in this way, the Quranic worldview will be in line with the way we think. And if the way we think is correct, then our behavior and our attitude will be correct. Because our behavior and attitude are byproducts of our way of thinking. So when you're, I summarized the 3 steps in ERA. So first we engrave some ayat in our hearts. And then we recall whenever needed, and then we act. So engrave some ayat, recall these ayat whenever needed, and act based on these ayat. Whenever we face difficulties in life, we face situations we do not like, and we also face situations that we like. What is your immediate reaction? And is this reaction guided by the Quran? And if it is not guided by the Quran, what would you store in your mind or in your heart so that when something happens, you have the right reaction? This is the whole idea. So we're not talking about memorizing the Quran. And this is, by the way, it's not just a class for a few minutes. I gave some samples here that we'll discuss how to control our thoughts in the Quranic way, in a way that represents the Quranic worldview. But at least this is your life journey. Every day, every week, you have your journal, and you're adding an ayah that you think your behavior should be modeled according to it, and you memorize it and you recall it whenever possible. So I had someone coming, for example. Well, let's move on and before we talk about how to practically use this technique. So what kind of ayat we need? Again, we need some ayat that would serve as a map for us. An explorer would need a map for directions. We do the same. We do need these ayat for directions. We need ayat that would serve as light. It gives us light throughout the way. We need an ayat that would be like your refuge. Or the cave that you resort to whenever you face a trouble or you face the risks and difficulties of life, so you feel secure and safe. This is not just empty words. We'll come to some ayat that would really give us authentic direction in life. We need also some ayat that would be immunizations against bad thoughts. This is very important. And I found it interesting that many scholars in the past, when I say in the past, I mean the Middle Ages. Of course, they didn't know that they are in the Middle Ages at that time. And who knows what kind of ages this will be called later. But anyway, so Middle Ages does not mean يعني بالعكس, these are very sophisticated people. But anyway, so we need ayat that would be like your immunization against bad thoughts. We need some ayat that would be like the elixir of life and a balm for broken hearts. We need some ayat that would instill in us a strong will that would serve as the shock absorber in your car. It makes you bounce back when you face something unexpected. So similar thing, and this builds resilience. So this is what I will be trying to do. It's now given for granted that your thoughts determine the way you behave. So in the last class, we closed with this experiment by Imam Al-Razi. And I found the reference, by the way. I finished the whole side of the tafsir, and I came across that passage. So in order to, Imam Al-Razi talked about the idea that your thoughts can affect you, not just your behavior, can affect you physically. Your body can respond to fake thoughts. And the response is real, and the thoughts are fake. So yes, thoughts, and he gave the example of the lemon. If you have a lemon if you imagine a lemon in your mouth, you would feel the sour, even though there is no lemon or anything. So there is a very good book about this. So by James Allen, As Man Thinks, in 1903. It's it's a booklet, by the way, very brief, maybe a few pages. As Man Thinks. James Allen's. So the point of this booklet is eventually you will be what you're thinking. You will be what you're thinking. Because eventually what you think will spur you into action. So you should care about what you think. And he beautifully compares the mind to a garden that will produce anything you sow in it. He said in the natural world, nothing comes from corn except corn. If you plant corn, you get corn. Unless you're playing with it nowadays. But if you plant corn, you get corn. If you plant A, you get A. So he said this is also true in the moral world. If you have angry thoughts, you will end up being angry. If you have positive thoughts, you will be positive. He beautifully writes this. He said, a mind may be likened to a garden, which may be intellectually cultivated or allow it to run wild. But whether cultivated or neglected, it must and will bring forth. If no useful seeds are put into it, then an abundance of useless seeds will fall therein and will continue to produce their own kind. So, again, you have now three options. No thoughts, and you're waiting for random thoughts to determine your behavior, or negative thoughts that will lead to ruin and destruction, or from now you set up positive thoughts, Quranic thoughts in your heart. So if a problem, not just a problem, what if you're facing you received great news? There is something from the Quran that would determine the way you behave. قُلْ بِفَضْلِ, I would say, if I receive very good news, an ayah that would come to my mind would be قُلْ بِفَضْلِ اللَّهِ وَبِرَحْمَتِهِ فَبِذَلِكَ فَلْيَفْرَحُوا. Say, only in the grace of Allah and His mercy, let people rejoice. So when something good happens to me, I do not just make myself bigger and bigger and look on my own achievement, but an ayah could come to save me from that and look at the mercy of Allah and the grace of Allah and the tawfiq and the guidance of Allah. So this will save me from what? Will fortify my heart from arrogance, from pride. That is why the Sunnah, the Prophet ﷺ, whenever he received his good news, what would he do? There is sajda. He would fall on his face, making sujood. This is called salatul shukr. It's called the prayer of gratitude. It's not a complete prayer, it's just the sujood. But this immediate reaction when you receive good news, it's to make sure that you maintain a safe, a spiritually healthy heart. Because these good news could change you into developing negative attitudes, becoming more arrogant. So this is the idea of this class. So we need to come up with some ayat that would serve these purposes. And does the Quranic ayat fit? As I said, absolutely, because the Quran itself there are many descriptions about the Quran. The Quran is called basair. Basair is basically an argument in the form of an insight. It's an argument that makes your heart see. So it comes from basira. So there is basar, that is the physical eye. Basira is the spiritual eye. So basar is the eye where the eye of the body is. Basira is where the eye of the heart is. So the Quran gives us basair, gives us words that through which our heart and our mind and our thinking can be guided. These are exact descriptions of the Quran. Is called light 4 times. The Quran is called Bashir wa Nadir, good news and warner. The Quran is called guidance, Huda. It's called Khair, good. And it's called Rahmah, mercy. So all of these descriptions fits to find some verses in the Quran that you can use as of tonight to set up in your heart and recall whenever possible, and or whenever read it, and act upon it or demonstrate it. I like in my khutbahs to focus on emotions, so we have some samples here. The first one is about loss. Well, if in case, as I said, this is not only for negative things that we face, but since this is very sensitive and hard sometimes to control your thoughts, so I thought of just giving an example of these emotions. And what would we find in the Quran that deals with these emotions that you set up now, so that whenever it happens, you know what to recall. So can you read us the first passage? قول يا عم مالك أنت الأقرأ للكاميرا.
On loss and trials, we will certainly test you with the touch of fear and famine and loss of property, life, and crops. Give good news to those who patiently endure, who when faced with a disaster say, surely to Allah we belong, and to Him we will all return. They are the ones who will receive Allah's blessings and mercy, and it is they who are rightly guided.
So what is in this passage? This is not just one ayah, it's a full passage that deals with what to do with loss. You see three things running throughout this passage. The first thing is about expectations. The second is your beliefs about life. And the third is about beliefs beyond this life. So the first one is very directly and simply saying, وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ, we'll test you. Cannot be clearer than this. So if you face trouble in life, do not be surprised, because you already set up this idea in your mind. So do not tell me there is pain and there is evil, so there is no God. Now the Quran itself and all of the prophets of God faced the most unspeakable trials and tortures ever on earth. So we do not have this kind of equations. The Quran from the beginning says, you will be tested. And it says with a touch of, بشيء, it will not be that huge. It can be tolerated and you can survive it. But since you know who you are and who Allah is, and you develop that connection and that love and that longing, these feelings will be tested. And it would be a chance for us to grow, basically. So, so when you know from the beginning, when you understand what life is, that would be part of the shock absorber in your car that would help you bounce back when something happened. So it helps you to have the right expectations of life. So be realistic about life. Life is a mixture of good and bad. It's a mixture of good and bad. It's not Jannah. Jannah will be there. But this life is a mixture of good and bad. So is a doctor surprised when they see someone coming to the hospital with fever? They say, oh, sorry. No, this is what they expect. Is a healthman surprised when the wind blew against him? He expects this. I mean, it is possible. And he's already set up with what he can do to encounter these thoughts, or at least to help him remain calm and steady so that they do not lose more. And it is a chance to show the real them, the real you. So this is what we get from the first part. So we will test you. That is already set up. We know the nature of life. And then it moves on to give good news about how to actually, what should be your attitude when it happens. So this is your attitude before it happens. Before a problem happens, I know what life is. Ibn Ata'illah said, لا تستغرب وقوع الأقدار ما دمت في هذه الدار. That is Quran, basically. I mean, this is based on وَلَنَبْلُوَنَّكُمْ. Why are you surprised? It says, do not be surprised when you're faced by a trial. لا تستغرب وقوع الأقدار, the troubling of life, do not be surprised by it, as long as you're still alive. فإنها ما أظهرت إلا ما هو واجب نعتها ومستحق وصفها. It just brought forth what it is about. It's not Jannah. So, now, and then it moves on to say, وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. Now, here, you are in the midst of the problem, and you're receiving that. This is how the ayat would give comfort during difficult time, during doubt and difficulties. So, وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. Who's the one giving the bushra? Give good news. Who's the one giving the bushra? It's Allah. You know, when we read a hadith like, and Jibreel said to the Prophet, say to Aisha or say to this man, Allah yuqri'uka salam, you feel like, Allah yuqri'uka salam, this is, Allah is sending His peace to that and greeting to that person. Now Allah is giving you the good news. The good news. وَبَشِّرِ الصَّابِرِينَ. The good news for those who endure patiently. But with one condition. If you can control your attitude and control your thought. How, if I am in the middle of a loss or difficulty, control my thought? The Quran gives us very brief, concise and precise statement. That is your world view that would help you survive. Just very simple words. Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. What should you say? What is your attitude? What you should be thinking about? To Allah we belong, and to Him we shall return. To Allah we belong, and to Him we shall return. You know, because we keep saying Assalamu alaikum, Assalamu alaikum, it loses its power. Because Assalamu alaikum is a wish that, Assalamu alaikum is a great wish for people. Salam is peace and mercy and blessings of Allah. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Salam is like you will be, I wish that you're protected from harm. And rahmah, receiving good. And barakah, this good will continue. Imagine if someone is saying to you sincerely from their heart that I really wish that you're safe from troubles of life and you receive good throughout your life and this good will continue. That is the greeting that we say every day. It is a dua, an expression of my good hopes for others. That's why the Prophet said spreading the salam in this way will spread love between people. But because we use it so frequently, it loses its power and its effect. And people, as I was asking some 50th graders, I was teaching them, I said, what is the meaning of Assalamu alaikum? They say it means hi. Because it's so frequently used that you do not reflect on what it means. So similar things here. When a problem happens, or especially in cases of death, we say, Inna lillahi, to people, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, to Allah we belong. Again, it loses its power because of how frequently it is used. But if we mindfully implant it and inscribe it in our hearts to serve as immunization, then it will not lose that power. So, Inna lillahi, we belong to Allah. Wa inna ilayhi raji'un, to Him we shall return. What is the meaning of we belong to Allah? I do not own things. Basically, my ownership of things is not real. We are entrusted with things. And the hard fact that the more you embrace, the more you can survive, even though it is hard, we have no sense of entitlement. The more that you can embrace this, the more blessed you see yourself. Because you start with the idea that I have no entitlement over anything. And now when you look at what you have, these are all blessings. It is a tough fact of life. if you deal in life as if you are entitled to receive, you will be disappointed. It is a tough fact. I cannot say otherwise. But this is necessary for developing the right thoughts and thereby the right behavior. So, وَإِنَّ إِلَيْهِ رَاجِعُونَ, to him we shall return. Life in Islam is not just these few hours we're living in. It extends to include the afterlife. So I do not judge this life by the few years we're living here. It's only one chapter, and it is a long novel that you cannot judge by that first chapter. There are other chapters to come, to follow. So, inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And then the ayah gives hope. The ayat later would give more hope and says, such people, if they really have that attitude, أُولَٰئِكَ عَلَيْهِمْ صَلَوَاتٌ مِّن on them will be salawat of Allah and the rahmah. Salawat means praise. The word salah is actually praise. So when Allah does salah for a person, Allah is praising them, recognizing them, elevating their status and position. So these people will have this salawat and rahmah and mercy. وَأُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُهْتَدُونَ. These are the really guided ones. Not someone else. It's like the way it is phrased in Arabic. أُولَٰئِكَ هُمُ الْمُهْتَدُونَ. These are the really guided ones. Not the people who are just claiming to be surrendering to Allah. Because now you face that trouble and you're saying, Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. Allah gives and withdraws. This is all Inna lillah wa inna ilayhi raji'un. And I told you before, this is what I think I said it in this class too. Imam al-Razi was in his commentary towards the end of his life, maybe 3 or maximum 5 years before he passed away. Maybe, I think 3 years before he passed away. He was in Surah Yusuf, and subhanallah, he came across the ayah that says, "Nama ashku bathi wa huzni Allah." I plead my grieving and complaints only to Allah. Right before he stopped tafsir at this point, and then his child passed away. When he came back to tafsir, that was the ayah, that was the turn of the ayah that he needs to explain. And he was meditating on it, taking it personally. And he was expressing his agony, basically, and his sorrow. This is an obedient child. Please make dua for him. And he has few lines of poetry in praise of him. But the point is, after I read this, I made a dua for his son and for him. I mean, this is what life is. It's just few years. I am not minimizing the pain. There is no doubt about this. But the Quran here gives you bigger perspectives. If you want to move on, you need to have bigger beliefs than life itself. The bigger your perspective of life is, the smaller these troubles will look like. And this is a shortcut piece of advice for overcoming troubles. Because we're all face troubles. Have bigger goals in life and pursue these big goals. These troubles along the way will be small compared to that big goal that you're pursuing. And there is nothing bigger than making your goal that connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and your beliefs about the afterlife as the real life. So this is an example of something that needs to be engraved in our hearts so that we know what to do when. Again, sorry, the ayat I selected deals with sorrow, but again, it's, as I said, we become very weak when we face troubles in life. So I thought we need to control our thoughts the most at these moments. Can you give me a copy because I don't have one? No, تقرأ. You have extra, guys.
Yeah.
نعم في الخارج. طيب, can you read the next one, please? We need to go quicker.
Do people think they will be left alone after saying, "We believe," without being put to the test? We tested those who went before them. God will certainly mark out which ones are truthful and which are lying.
Now, again, do not limit test to problems. Test is not about problems. Test is something that shows who you are. It could be a problem, and your reaction will show who you are. It could be a blessing. You receive blessings in your life, and if you're grateful, that shows who you are. If you're ungrateful, that shows who you are. It could be an act of worship that you're required to demonstrate, and if you're too arrogant, you will not do it. So it could be it could be about time. It could be making the best use of your time, because we're here to do amara, cultivation of life. These are 4 major tests in life. You love Allah, طيب, can you worship? I mean, do you acknowledge Allah as the great and you're the needy? Can you express that in worship, in fasting, in zakah, in hajj? And do you claim to be really God-focused and God-oriented? Can you make the best use of your time? So, هو أنشأكم من الأرض واستعمركم فيها. Allah commanded you to cultivate this life. So what are you doing with your time? What are you doing with the trials? What are you doing with the blessings? So these are 4 different tests. It's not only deprivations that is a test. Actually, many people can survive deprivation, but Allah will not survive the blessings, because the blessings will be more destructive. So if you engrave these ayat in your heart, you can turn the trial into a triumph, and rejection into direction. I just memorized these words. Now, طيب, قول يا سيدي.
On expressing sadness?
نعم. طيب, you might say, ماشي, that makes sense, but I still, that is normal. If you still have that pain, that's absolutely normal. Are you serious? Yes. Isn't this a contradiction of Iman? Because I thought that if the more Iman you have, the less sorrowful you will be. No, it has nothing to do with Iman. You can have tears in your eyes and say Alhamdulillah. There is no contradiction. And we have 4 references about this, and could you read? This is the most graphic one about sorrow, is that of Yaqub over Yusuf alayhi salam. Can you read that one?
He replied, "I complain of my anguish and sorrow only to Allah, and I know from Allah what you do not know."
Anguish and sorrow, what is the difference? In Arabic it's bathi wa huzni. Huzn is the sorrow that can be manifested, that you can see in people's face, you can see in their words. But il-bath is the sorrow and the pain you hide, that people do not know about. So this is a prophet. He has so much pain. Some of it you can recognize, and some of it is deeply rooted in his heart that cannot show. This is a prophet. It's not a sheikh, it's not normal Muslim, it's not a wali. This is a prophet. No one would know Allah more than these prophets. But that iman does not mean that you do not feel that sorrow. Again, I am not saying that will continue, but at least you can, the expression of it to Allah is very normal. And but you can be sad, but not in a way that weakens you, because that would mean giving up. So there is a subtle line that we need not to cross. Naam, and another one is from Maryam alayha salam.
Then the pains of labor drove her to the trunk of a palm tree. She cried, "Alas, I wish I had died before this, and was a thing long forgotten."
That's also very hard to hear. Someone is saying, "I wish I died." But remember, can we wish death? Scholars agree not to. Unless you're wishing death to escape from a religious fitna, a religious problem. Yani I am facing a religious problem and I know this will affect my faith, so at this time I wish I am not here. And this is the case of Maryam. It's not because she doesn't have enough money, or because the thing is she's pregnant and she comes from righteous family and she's innocent and no one there to believe her. So it could get people really mad. So at this time she said, I wish I died before this happened, because she was worried about her religious reputation, and that is not haram. It's good to work on preserving your reputation. That's why the Quran and Hadith commanded us not to expose ourselves before people. طيب, and she said, وَكُنْتُ نَسْيًا مَنْسِيًّا. It's not just a thing long forgotten. It is something that, Nasyan is something that is insignificant. It has no value. Now, and also the Prophet ﷺ, we have two ayat here depicting his sorrow to the point of almost dying. Now,
are those whose evil doing is made so appealing to them that they deem it good, like those who are rightly guided? It is
so the beginning of the ayah, shows the struggle. The Prophet's job is to guide people, and we have some people who are here who are very stubborn and giving the Prophet hard time. And then,
it is certainly Allah who leaves to stray whoever He wills, and guides whoever He wills.
Of course, the expressions like this, Allah's actions, are understood based on His attributes. So Allah guides and misguides. Why? Because He has absolute knowledge, absolute power, absolute wisdom. So yes, Allah does what He wants. If I do what I want, that is dictatorship, because I do not have full knowledge, I do not have full wisdom, I do not have absolute wisdom. But Allah, do not compare Allah's actions to yours. لا يسأل عما يفعل. Allah is not to be questioned. Not because it is arbitrary, but because He has the perfect attributes. So it becomes very natural. No one would be against Allah. No one knows more than Allah. No one is more fair than Allah, and so on. So when you understand these ayat, remember that there is a big set or a long set of attributes that needs to be taken into consideration. Now,
so do not grieve yourself to death over them, O Prophet.
Do not grieve to death, O Prophet. What does it mean? The Prophet is really in big sorrow over them. And the same thing is repeated also in Surah Al-Kahf.
Surely Allah is knowing of what they do. Now perhaps you, O Prophet, will grieve yourself to death over their denial if they continue to disbelieve in this message.
So, how would we cope? Anything in the Quran that we engrave in our hearts to learn how to cope with loss and difficulties? And I did pick two surahs, and also about the Prophet ﷺ, because if you're thinking of someone in this ummah who suffered the most, you would definitely say it is the Prophet ﷺ. As I mentioned before, he lost all of his kids during his lifetime. This is something on the side, as we said before. So let alone the da'wah issues and his confrontation with people and rejection and abuse and all of that, and killings of his Sahaba and so on. So we have this Surah Al-Sharh and Surah Al-Duha. I did give two khutbahs about these two surahs, analyzing the emotional and psychological insights that helps us cope with pain based on these two ayat surahs. So let's give some notes quickly about this.
Have we not uplifted your heart for you, O Prophet, and we removed from you your burden, which weighed so heavily on your back, and raised your reputation high? So surely with hardship comes ease. Surely with that hardship comes more ease. So when you have finished your duties, then stand up for worship. turning to your Lord alone with hope.
See how the surah begins? There is loving, uplifting tone. It's very amazing. Haven't we done this for you? It's like someone hugging you, someone tapping your shoulder. Do not worry, this will be fine. If the Prophet needed this, we do need that. So that's why do not abstain from the idea of checking with a professional counselor if you needed help. Because this is divine counseling. The Prophet needed that help. So if I am going through hardship, the ayah, haven't we given you this, haven't we given you this? So you have 4 lines about things Allah gave the Prophet. What does this do? You can replace these. If Allah has not uplifted your heart or removed your burden or that weighed so heavily on your back and raised your reputation, list 4 blessings that Allah gave you and ask yourself, because the self is in pain and the self is losing hope in life. So you need to start to self-preaching and say to your nafs, haven't we given you this? Don't you have this? Don't you have this? At least 4 of these blessings. So that you're not just looking under your feet, as they say in Arabic. So expand your perspective. So this is cultivating, enjoying what you have, examining what you have. And then, so surely, what does it say?
Duha, the next one?
No.
So surely with hardship comes ease.
Now, again, I would remind myself of what life is all about.
Surely with that hardship comes more ease.
So again, the first part is about cultivating gratitude. So this still relates to you. The second way in that this surah is referring to is, again, reviewing your perspective of life. It is a mixture of good and bad. And if you're facing hardship, there is already ease prescribed for you, as this hardship was ordained. So what is coming will be the ease and more ease. And then move to worship. So someone is very sad in the beginning of the surah, and at the end he's standing up in prayer. So Surah Al-Duha, it follows the same exact pattern, but maybe with different ideas. Now, can you read it, please? No.
By the morning sunlight and the night when it falls still, your Lord has not forsaken you, Prophet, nor does He hate you.
Exactly. Have you ever entertained these thoughts? I am going through all of this trouble, all of this. You feel Allah is so distant. Does He hear me? Is He there? So this is something the Prophet had similar thoughts, or the mushrikeen accused him of saying, oh, your God must have forsaken you. Because this surah was revealed when the revelation ceased for a few months. That was very painful. It could turn you crazy. What's going on? Is this shaitan or jinn or what? So it says affirmatively, Allah has not forsaken you. Just because you're going through hardship does not mean that Allah does not like you, or Allah does not hear you or forsaken you. Remember, we understand what life is about. Sometimes this is a time when you get tough on yourself, because that inner voice is harsh. And during pain, you're weak. So you need to have these counter ayat and counter thoughts that you need to set up very successfully. And then reflect on them when it happens and say it affirmatively. So we can add also part of these ayat, affirmations from the Quran. There are a lot of promises in the Quran. So you need affirmations from the Quran that would lighten up your path. Can you keep going, because we're running out of time?
And surely your Lord will give so much to you I'm sorry. And the next life is certainly far better for you than this one.
Again, broaden your perspective. It's not only this dunya.
And surely your Lord will give so much to you that you will be pleased.
And do you doubt these promises? And then, because you could say, okay, طيب, how? And then it says,
Did he not find you as an orphan, then shelter you?
examine your past life. You will see Allah's blessings there, even before you ask them. Do you think He will leave you alone when you're asking? So use Allah's experience with you in the past as a proof that these promises will come true and that ease will come. And do not delay your happiness. And do not associate happiness with future events. All scholars, all spiritual masters agree that Al-Arif, the one who really knows Allah, Ibn Waqtih. What is Ibn Waqtih?
At the perfect time, the right time?
Is the one living the moment. Right? So the Arif does not have past, does not have future. This is the now. Is what you need to be looking at. To be of the now. This is the one who knows you, because yesterday is gone and tomorrow is not born yet. So your world, your life is that of now. This is what they all agree on. طيب, can you move on? Again, this doesn't mean you don't plan, but you do not become, you do not let these things to disturb your peace, basically. No.
Did he not find you unguided, then guide you? And did he not find you needy, then satisfy your needs?
Now, one great sign of recovery from depression is social engagement. So we see the Prophet in the beginning being addressed as Allah did not forsake you, and at the end we'll see him socially engaged, and this is a great sign that khalas, he's recovered. Or this is also a hint if we want to survive, to engage more socially with others.
So do not oppress the orphan, nor repulse the beggar, and proclaim the blessings of your Lord.
Speak the blessings of your Lord, even you're in some pain. About forgiveness. I committed a sin, and this sin is so horrible, and the shaitan is sending these thoughts to my mind that Allah is not going to forgive me. What would be my reaction? What would be is there an ayah that would come and address this? And I shared this ayah with many people, and subhanAllah, it's like magic.
Say, O my servants, who have committed sins excessively against their own selves, never despair of Allah's mercy. Indeed, Allah forgives all sins. Indeed, it is He alone who is the all-forgiving, the all-merciful.
I remember in seeking ihsan, we analyzed this ayah word by word to prove that each word communicates Allah's absolute mercy. Each word, literally. You can reflect on this on your own. What about words? There is something, we talked also about this, the power of words before, and this ayah should be engraved in our hearts. Before you say something, you have to pause and then think about it and then ponder. Pause and ponder. No.
Tell my believing servants to say only what is best. Satan certainly seeks to sow discord among them. Satan is indeed a sworn enemy to humankind.
Now, what if you see a case of racial discrimination? Is there an ayah in the Quran that would address this in few words? And we'll close with that.
O mankind, indeed we created you from a male and a female, and made you into peoples and tribes so that you may get to know one another. Surely the most noble of you in the sight of Allah is the most righteous among you. Allah is truly all-knowing, all-aware.
Now, so it cannot be more beautifully said than this. Again, I hope you got the point of this class today. For more spiritual reading of the Quran and beneficial spiritual reading, we'll go with Era. We should have copyrights. Engrave, recall, and act. Wallahu ta'ala a'la wa a'lam.